Hey everyone! Now that we're rapidly approaching the end of the year, then I wanted to go ahead and just kind of like wrap up my thoughts on these two planners that I used this year, that being the A6 Hobonichi HON as well as my B6 Sterling Ink Common Planner. This is the first year that I've used any Hobonichi or Sterling Ink products, and so I thought that this would just kind of serve as like a good summary of basically like a first year user's experience with these two planners and whether or not I would recommend them as planners and possibly if I would consider getting them again in the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right in because I feel like this is probably going to be a lengthy one. I want to go ahead and start off with the B6 Sterling Ink Common Planner just because this one was kind of like the main planner that I was in all year. This is what I considered my actual planner where I did like my organizing and like productivity to-do lists, but I also did like some time tracking, kind of like some memory keeping and logging and whatnot, and then also like some journaling. So just for some clarity, then this is a B6 vertical weekly full year, and so this is pretty chunky. This is how it looks like pretty much after I've bulked it up throughout the entire year and have used it daily. And this is specifically in the caramel colorway. It has this faux leather material for the cover. Now for about 2 or 3 months earlier this year, kind of like around the springtime, I did have a clear cover on this planner, but I actually prefer the feel of it without the clear cover, and I ultimately wanted to kind of get a better gauge on how the planner performed just completely on its own with no like protective covers or anything, especially because I think these planners typically run about like $50 US. Then I definitely feel like the cover should be able to hold up on its own without the need of like an additional cover to assist with protecting it. So basically I'd say that for the most part my planner remains here at home. It usually like sits on a desk or like on my couch or something when I'm not using it, but I do go to the office twice a week for work, and so then when I do bring this with me to work or when I like travel to go and visit like my family and whatnot, then I always just carry this in my backpack. So it's either at home on a desk or it's like in a backpack. So that's just to serve as some context as to how like the cover holds up. Your experience may be completely different depending on how often you travel, but in terms of probably like 40% traveling with this and then 60% of it just staying here at home like in one spot, I'd say that I am very impressed with how the cover held up. I hope that you'll be able to tell on camera here, but just kind of along like the edges here and like definitely with like the rounded corners, I do feel like there is just a little bit of like upturning of the cover, and the corners are just like a little bit bent, and I would assume that just has to do with like the traveling and having it in a backpack. And so that's kind of the main thing that I notice with the cover, as far as not having like any additional protection on top of it. One thing to consider if you do have pets like I do, I have 2 cats. One of them actually kind of like dug their claws into the cover up here. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but there are like 2 little dots like right here from when he dug his claws into it. And it's not terrible, but I feel like in certain angles and certain lighting that I do definitely see it. So that is something you may want to just keep in mind. Personally, I think it just kind of gives it like a little bit more personality with those little like dings inside of it. In terms of the gold foil down here, I don't notice like any of it scratching off by any means. I think that it held up very beautifully. There's absolutely nothing wrong that I can see with it, and so I'm very happy to report that this doesn't appear to be like cheaply made or anything. It was definitely made very thoughtfully, and so I'm very happy to report on that. So that's basically it for like the front cover here. In terms of the spine, you can see that I've definitely added quite a bit of bulk to my planner over the year, and I'll go ahead and get into the binding in a little bit, but I don't notice any visible wear on the spine except for just this tiny little spot up here. Hopefully you can see there's just kind of like a little indentation there, but it's not too noticeable unless you're like really staring at it closely like right now. But again, just with the gold foil here, no visible wear or tear, which is wonderful to see. And then moving on to the back cover, it kind of just suffers from the same cosmetic wear as the front cover, where there's just a little bit of like bending and upturning of the edges around here. The gold foil back here looks perfectly fine as well, and I think that it's even more impressive given that the back cover is pretty much what's always like touching the surface of like a desk or a table or something, and the fact that it doesn't appear to be like scratching off or anything from any of that like pressure or friction, I think just says a lot about like the quality in the planner in terms of the cover. One thing I do want to mention specifically with the back cover, and I've noticed this on like my Leuchtturm like hardcover notebooks as well, is I'm not sure how well you can see, but there are like just a couple of like little tiny black dots, and I think that just has to do kind of with like the pressure and like the friction on the surface of the desk or table, whatever surface you have the planner laying on. And when you're writing and decorating stuff like in your planner, then I think possibly like just some dirt or debris from the surface can kind of like rub into the back cover here. So it's not very noticeable, especially with this colored cover. It may be a little bit more noticeable on like the lighter covers, so that may be something that you want to keep in mind. But yeah, aside from those little like minor details, just from using the planner every single day for the past year, I'm very impressed with how it held up. I'm not taken back or disappointed with any of like wear that I am seeing on the cover. In fact, I'm quite impressed with how well it's held up just completely on its own. So I think it was made with very high quality materials, and if I were to get another common planner in the future, I really don't see the need to get like a protective cover, especially to end up like bulking it up even more than it already is. Now, before we move on to the inside of the planner, I just briefly want to talk about the binding. I have been so incredibly impressed with the binding. Like I mentioned, I definitely bulked up my planner quite a bit, just from pasting in like stickers, additional like paper and like letters, ephemera, stuff like that. So I'm very impressed with how it held up. I don't feel like it's on the verge of like tearing apart by any means, and it just still feels very well put together and very intact. And one of the things that I was so very impressed with the binding is that, especially when you're working on like one of these like front pages or like something all the way like in the back here, when you go to lay like the actual planner down, then it can feel very uncomfortable trying to like write with hardly any support behind this page. And so one of the great features about this type of binding is that you can essentially just bend the book back on itself, grab some pages like from the front of the book, and then just bend the binding all the way back. And that may look scary to some of you, but that is definitely like one of the most wonderful features about this type of binding, is that you have the ability to do this and it doesn't ruin the planner in any way. So that way it just creates more of like an even surface for you to write across both pages. So I do really love the binding of this planner, and I have done that quite a bit this year, and I don't notice like any issues with it. And then in terms of the paper for the common planner, then they use the Sanzen Tomoe River paper 52 GSM, so they are able to include, I think it's about like 572 pages in this planner, which is wonderful. It's a lot of pages, but it doesn't look like a crazy amount just because of how thin the paper is. We'll go ahead and kind of like talk about the quality of the paper a little bit more once I start flipping through the planner here. So let's go ahead and move on to the spreads on the inside and just kind of talk about those. So when you get a common planner, then it does include basically like this blank spread that just has like the grid ruling on it. And the way that I decided to use this spread for my planner this year was to create a master bills list. This was something that I've always included in like my bullet journals that I used to make in the past. I find that it's just very helpful to have all of the bills that will be coming out that year written down in one specific area in my planner, just so that I can reference it. I do come back and update it as bills change throughout the year, and it's not really like super functional by any means, but I really enjoyed the practice of just writing them all out here. That way it'll just hopefully help to cement it more in my mind, and just helps me to be more aware of like when bills come out, like every month or every like 3 months or every 6 months, etc. And then below that I have a section for future plans. Again, this was always something that I included in my past bullet journals. I just really like to have a dedicated section to write out like future plans that will be happening in the following year. And so because my planners typically only span for an entire year, I find that having a section like this is very helpful, and then I can just reference this page and then write it down in my new planner for next year. And then in terms of this page here, then I just have a when did I last list. I just wrote down a few different tasks and then wrote down the first initial of every month across the top here. And then basically whenever I completed the task, then I would just come back in and cross off like whichever month I did it. And this was mostly for like tasks that I didn't necessarily need to do like every month, but I still wanted to keep track of when the last time I did it, just because I would have to either do it like every few months or so. So in terms of this spread here, I am very appreciative that I set this up this way. I know that in some of my earlier updates, I was kind of going back and forth with this when did I last, but I've decided that when I set up my 2026 planner, which I'll go ahead and link right here in case you haven't seen it, but I decided that in order to set myself up for success for 2026, I wanted to include another list like this because I did find it helpful, but I just went ahead and wrote out all of the tasks ahead of time, and that way I feel like it will just have a lot more meaning right off the bat for 2026. And then moving on to the goal breakdown page, again, I've also mentioned this in like earlier updates. I personally just didn't really find this spread too useful for me. I did try and use it exactly like how it was intended for like some goal topics over here, and then it just breaks it down into a few different like timelines, such as someday, 1 year, half year, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily. Personally, for me, I've always kind of struggled with like goal setting and whatnot and following through with that stuff. So I think it's more so like user error and more of like my issue than like the actual spread itself. So personally for me, I didn't find much value with this spread in particular, but I figured, you know, if I were to get another common planner in the future, I would maybe try it again, or I would possibly have to just repurpose the spread for something else. In terms of the yearly tracker, then I really enjoyed this spread. I thought that it was very beneficial and helpful. I really love being able to see the entire year just all on one spread. And so we just have like the months going across the top here from January all the way through December, and then vertically then we have all of the days of the month. And because each day has 2 lines, on the top then I would write the workout that I did that day. If I didn't do a workout, then I would just draw a dash, and then below that then I used that to track my weight. And then these red marks, then that is basically just to track my period throughout the year. And for that, then I specifically used this Tombow 837 shade. And yeah, I would just track the days that I was on my period throughout the year. And essentially, I just used this spread as kind of like a health tracker all at a glance. So I thought that it was just very helpful. I love being able to just try and like figure out any patterns between like weight fluctuations as well as like my period, and just also holding myself accountable and writing down like the workouts that I do. So as far as using this spread for a health tracker, I really enjoyed having this spread be included in the common planner. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but before I get too carried away, I do want to say that this isn't going to be like a full flip through of either of these planners. I will be uploading those after the new year. I just want to make sure that I actually like finish these planners first before I do that. So hopefully you're excited for that. Make sure to stay tuned if you are interested. Let's go ahead and move on to the next set of spreads. Here then we have like a few quarterly spreads, and so each spread is just dedicated to one specific quarter. So this one being for quarter 1, quarter 2, and so on. And so the way that these spreads are laid out is that you have kind of like a priorities box up here, and then you have a box for January, February, and March. You also have vertical monthly spreads over here for those same corresponding months. And the way that I used it for quarter 1 was that I pretty much just wrote down my quarterly priorities up here, and then I also wrote down priorities for each month. And then for the vertical monthlies over here, then I used these as habit trackers. And then for these highlighted strips at the end of the month, then I just went through and took like a Tombow or like a Mildliner and then just colored in the habits that I was successfully able to do every single day. I find that that's just kind of a good way to motivate me to want to complete as many habits as I possibly can throughout the month. So this is how I started off using these spreads for quarter 1. In quarter 2, as you can see, starting in May, I ended up changing these sections to like media trackers, and that was because I personally wasn't really coming back and like referring to my monthly priorities over here, and I just felt like I wanted to repurpose it to something a little bit more meaningful. And I will get into it a little bit later, but I still wanted like monthly priorities somewhere, but I ended up just finding like a different place to put them is all. But I didn't want to leave these sections blank, and I wanted to just repurpose it to something more meaningful, and so I started setting up media trackers. I've just been tracking like the music I've been listening to, TV shows and movies that I've watched, as well as books that I've read. And I've been enjoying this so much that this is basically the way that I've been using these sections throughout the rest of the year, as you'll see. With the habit trackers, I feel like this was a very wonderful way for me to personally use the vertical monthlies over here. So I've been very pleased with these. I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. And that's basically just how I've ended up using these vertical monthlies for the entire year. I thought that it was just a very good use of these pages here. And then yeah, this is how quarter 3 ended up turning out. I feel like for the second half of 2025, I definitely found my groove with these quarterly pages up here. I really love being able to have like the media trackers to refer back to see like what I was really into at the time or what I was consuming at the time. And then I just really appreciate the routine of coming in and filling out like the habits that I did for that day on this spread here. So truly no complaints with these quarterly pages. Like I said, it just took me a little bit to really find like a meaningful purpose for each different section, but at this point in time, I'm definitely comfortable with what I've finally settled on. Now, in terms of the monthly spreads, I really didn't change these up too much. I really love a good monthly calendar in all of my planners. I feel like that's one way that I truly do see time is on like a monthly level. And so basically before the month starts, then I just like to come in and write out all of the bills, appointments, birthdays, anniversaries, meetings, stuff like that will be happening throughout the month, and that just serves as a visual guide for me to have my month at a glance. So I really don't have any complaints as far as the monthly calendar goes. The only thing that I did change was having like the expense tracker down here, which I've covered up, but I started off January with having the expense tracker down here and then having like my monthly to-dos, which was what I was alluding to earlier with the monthly priorities up here. Then I pretty much stopped putting them up here and then just moved them to like the monthly spreads here, because I felt like I referenced the monthly calendars much more than I looked at these pages here. And so basically starting in February, then I would say that like the rest of my months all pretty much look the same. I have the expense tracker on the vertical side over here, and then I have my monthly to-dos here at the bottom. So I feel like that worked out very beautifully. As you can see, then I do like to decorate my planner as well. I pretty much like to do some sort of like seasonal theme to go along with each month. And yeah, I truly have no complaints with the monthly spreads. Just for context, then the Common Planner does have like a Monday start, and so it goes from Monday through Sunday. And then in terms of the ruling for the Common Planner, then it is just this very soft and light gray, which I really love. You can definitely just keep your planner very minimal and have like no decorations on it, and I think it'll still look very classy and sophisticated. But if you're like me and you also like to add decorations to your planner just to kind of give it like a little bit more life and that like seasonal aspect to it, then I don't feel like decorations clash with the ruling of the spreads either. I feel like the color of the ruling is just very pleasant and easy to work around. And then in terms of the weekly spreads, then I'd say that for the most part I've kept it about the same for the entire year, with the exception that when I first got into this planner at the start of the year, then I went a little heavy on like all of the stickers to basically like log all of the things that I did during the day. But I quickly stopped doing that like pretty much like the beginning of February, as you can see. But I would say that with the exception of maybe like January, then for the most part my weekly spreads end up just kind of like looking like this. So let me go ahead and just break it down for you. Like I mentioned in the beginning, then this is specifically the vertical weekly spread. You basically just have like the vertical columns for each day of the week, again from Monday through Sunday. You do have a faint timeline just going down the side here for each day, and that goes from 6 a.m. to midnight. And that may just be specific to this B6 size. I guess I'm not sure what the different times would be for like different sized common planners, but just for reference, this is specific to the B6 one. So you get the month number up here in a large font. You also get the month written out below that, along with the year, the week number that you're in, and then there's also a mini monthly calendar here with the current week basically like circled or highlighted. I really do love having a monthly calendar to reference on all of the weekly spreads, just because I really love being able to reference like different parts of the month when I am planning and whatnot. So having this is a very nice feature and something that I do prefer to have like on my weekly spreads. And then over here, you basically have like a blank sidebar that you can do anything you'd like with. I know some people like to do like habit trackers and stuff, but specifically for me, I like to have this space as like a weekly to-do list. And so the way that I like to use it is just coming in before the week starts or right as the week starts, and then just brain dump everything that I want to get done that week. And so that way, when I'm doing my planning throughout the week, I can kind of like gauge how much time I will have like on specific days, and then I can reference the to-do list here, and then on the days that I feel like I don't have that much going on, then that is when I can assign specific to-dos on those certain days. So that's how I've been liking to use the sidebar here. And then in terms of like the daily columns, then I pretty much like to write any like important events at the very top here, as well as like bills coming out, any like birthdays or appointments going on, if I have to go to the office, stuff like that. I also write down like this little number at the top right, just to indicate like what day I'm on in my cycle. And then I also find that I do really like to reference the timeline on the side here, especially when I have like meetings or appointments and stuff. For example, you'll see that in terms of work, I had like a meeting at 10 a.m. and then I was supposed to have an appointment at 11, but I ended up crossing that out. But that is just something that I like to do, where I just draw a line out from that specific time and then just write out what's going on at that time. Another thing that I like to include for my weekly spreads is to draw out this bracket just to indicate like my work schedule from 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. And then I also use a different Mildliner every week just to signify like my intermittent fasting. I basically just highlight the times that I'm not eating, then I end the highlighting, and so basically like these blank windows here is when I am consuming stuff, and then I just go back in with that same Mildliner and then just restart my fast, basically, like at the end of every day. So for my weekly spreads, I really do enjoy the combination of planning, scheduling, like memory keeping and logging and stuff. If I don't have like too many to-dos, as you can see like over here on Sunday, I had a lot of to-dos that I wanted to get done. So sometimes if I have like a lot of to-dos, then I'll just write kind of like a huge list for the day. But if I don't have a lot of to-dos, then I just use that space to add like stickers or draw in little doodles to represent like what I ended up doing. And I do try and like reference the timeline on the side as well, just to kind of like write and log things chronologically. And then I find that I don't typically do stuff like later than like 10 or 11 p.m. And so with the space down here, then I pretty much just try and like decorate it according to whatever like the monthly calendar theme is. But yeah, I guess I don't really know what else to say about the weekly spreads. I personally really loved them. I would say that like up until 2025, I was very much like a horizontal weekly type of person, but that was one of the things that I really did want to try out with the Common Planner, is just the vertical weekly spreads, as well as having like the timeline. I just thought that that would be a really cool way to track what I was doing throughout the day in more of like a chronological order. So I really don't have anything to complain about the weekly spreads. And yeah, I really loved having the space to do like all of my planning and like scheduling, doing like some logging, but then also being able to tie in the monthly theme with like some decorations at the bottom. Hey, I'm just coming back in as I'm editing the video. I realized I forgot to mention how much I absolutely love the fact that in the Common Planner, it goes from like 6 a.m. to like 12 o'clock at noon, but then after that, it goes from like 1, 2, 3 all the way to like 12 a.m. Just the fact that it's not in military time makes me really appreciate these weekly spreads. And then moving on to basically like the final sections of the common planner. As you see here, pretty much like this section is all of like the planning portion of the common planner. And then like all of these pages back here are basically those same blank grid pages that you can do whatever you'd like with. And I think specific to the 2025 one, then it comes with 367 of these pages. And so you can definitely do like daily pages back here if you'd like. So if you want to do like additional planning for your days, or if you want to do like daily journal entries, you certainly have plenty of pages to do that. And so the way that I used my daily pages back here were kind of like a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. I think for the most part, I used it like as a journal. I didn't journal every single day in it, but I did use it mainly as a journal for like the first 6 months of the year. Every now and then I would just kind of take like some random notes as well. Or I would draw like some random layouts just to kind of like test it out before I actually like committed to it, like in my monthly or weekly spreads and stuff. I ended up doing like a lot of ink swatches back here as well, just because I did get really into fountain pens earlier this year. And then also like some planner plans back here. So it was just kind of a lot of like random stuff. I kind of just used it as like a notebook or like a journal whenever I needed it. I did paste in like some like flowers and stuff that I wanted to remember, and some random ephemera every now and then. So I think at this point it would be a good time to comment on the paper, just because, as some of you may be aware, for the past few years, ever since the Tomoe River paper got bought out by the Sanzen company, there has been a lot of discrepancies and inconsistencies with the Tomoe River paper, specifically with fountain pen inks. There's been known to be like a lot of bleed through as well as like feathering, and unfortunately I did run into that issue a few times. But I do want to preface this with the fact that for the most part, the fountain pen inks that I did use back here, I found that most of them performed perfectly. I didn't have any issues with them, but there were definitely some that were very troublesome and problematic. For instance, as you can see here, I think it more so had to do when I was like swatching the inks out in like more concentrated blobs like this, and specifically when I was using like a glass dip pen, then I felt like it probably just applied way too much ink onto the paper all at once, and so I did experience like some bleed through. I found that this Noodler's Georgia Peach, as well as the Jacques Bon Emerald of Chivor colors, were like the most problematic. And then as you can see, there's definitely like some bleed through up here as well, but I did find that when I actually inked up like these inks that ended up like bleeding through on these pages, when I inked them up in fountain pens, then they performed perfectly fine. So I don't know like what was with the inconsistencies. But yeah, I would say that that was perhaps the main issue that I did have with this paper. I think it is safe to say that when you're going with a planner with 52 GSM paper, ghosting should be part of your expectations. So if you do not like ghosting, unfortunately, I don't think this planner will be for you. But if you don't mind it, I think this paper is very beautiful, especially if you do like to use fountain pens, as well as like doing watercolor and stuff. I really did enjoy using my watercolor paints on this paper. I felt like it held up very nicely. Again, as to be expected with pretty much watercoloring on like most paper, then I do find that the page does tend to warp a little bit, but I feel like the paper really shows off like watercolor paints very beautifully. Basically for the weekly spreads, I mainly use like a Uniball One gel pen to write everything down. I use a Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip to do kind of like some headers here and there. And then every now and then for the decorations, I'll either do like stickers or watercolor paints, or write out lyrics with like a fountain pen, and I feel like it holds up perfectly fine over here. And also with like the Mildliners, I don't have any issues with those bleeding through over here in like the weekly spreads. But yeah, I would say that where it became problematic was just when I would do like heavier swatches of inks and whatnot. And again, I think that that just more so had to do with like specific inks, like this Noodler's Georgia Peach. Oh, that looks awful. I'd say that the majority of the other inks that I used in here held up perfectly fine. So I think that it's just really up to trial and error. So proceed with caution if you are an avid fountain pen user and you are wanting to use this paper. I think that when the ink agrees with the paper, then it looks very beautiful and is very much worth using on this paper, but then it can also be like really hit or miss. So unfortunately, I can't really say like for sure get this or for sure don't get this if you are into fountain pens. But yeah, in terms of like my overall thoughts on these daily pages, I absolutely loved having all of these blank pages back here. I really appreciated being able to like make plans up here, and then if I randomly thought of something that I wanted to like just quickly make a note of or like journal about, then I was able to just flip all the way back here and quickly write like a journal entry or something and just dump that out of my mind. So I absolutely love having all of these blank pages in the back. I just thought that it was so convenient. And then I also just wanted to briefly talk about kind of like the bookmarking system that I use. These tabs are all from Midori, and they're specifically like the Midori Chiratto tabs and clips. And so the difference is that these tabs are the ones that have kind of like these intricate metallic designs on them, and these are like permanent adhesive tabs. And then the index clips are actually these removable ones that kind of have like this copper finish to it. And so I absolutely loved this bookmarking system for this year. I used these permanent tabs to basically mark like the specific spreads up here that I would need to reference basically like all year long. And then I used the Chiratto clips to mark off like different sections that I would only need to reference like for a specific point in the year. So for instance, I have this first one flipping to whatever quarter we're currently in, and then I have this next one flipping to the current month that we're in. The next one flips to the current week, and then this final one back here flips to basically like the next blank page back here. So that's a brief explanation of my bookmarking system that I did this year. I thought that it worked out so perfectly that I'm actually adopting the same system for my planner next year. But yeah, I think that about does it for the common planner. Just to wrap up some final thoughts, would I recommend this? Absolutely. Again, just with the context that you don't mind ghosting, and if you're also someone kind of like me where you love that funneling system as part of your planner where you can have kind of like the big picture year at a glance and break it down into like quarterly sections and then down to monthly sections, all the way to like weekly, and if you wanted to, all the way to like daily bite-size pages, then you definitely have that option with this planner. And I also think if you like having a planner as well as a journal or notebook all in one, I think that this is such a wonderful option for you. If you don't want to use these pages back here for like daily planning, you don't have like the pressure to, just because they're like blank and they're not already like pre-dated. So you can just come in and use them whenever you need to throughout the year. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I felt like the cover was made very thoughtfully, and if you love the feel of just having the planner itself in your hands, I don't think that you need to have like a whole separate cover. I felt like this definitely sufficed for the entire year on its own. And honestly, I'm a little bit sad that I won't be in one of these next year. I've really come to love mine, and I definitely see myself possibly getting another one in like a future year. So I definitely would recommend a common planner if all of the different like criteria that I had mentioned sound really good to you. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the Hobonichi HON, and this is essentially the Hobonichi Techo original, but it is just called a HON because it has like its own design and like kind of this hardcover on it, and it also comes with like these two ribbon bookmarks. Let's go ahead and start off with the cover again. I'm not sure how well it's picking up on camera, hopefully you can see, but I feel like the cover got kind of scratched up and roughed up throughout the year. I feel like this is definitely something I should have gotten like a clear cover for. So again, just to reference the 2026 planner setup video that I did, I definitely purchased a clear cover for that Hobonichi HON. So I really wish that I would have thought to have purchased a clear cover for this one, because I really love how this cover looks, but it's much too late to protect it now. So I am a little bit disappointed, at how like scuffed up it got, but like I mentioned with the common planner, it's just kind of part of its personality now, and it definitely just shows how much it was used and loved this past year. But aside from the scuff marks and everything, then I do still really love the design of it, and I think that it held up very nicely. Just aside from like the scuff marks, I don't notice any issues with like the cover tearing apart or anything, which is very wonderful to see. I don't feel like the design is like coming off or anything. It was obviously very well constructed. The materials were very nice to make it, and so it's all still very much intact, which I love to see. And then let's go ahead and talk about like the inside of the planner. Now, I really did not use this as a planner this year, just because like I mentioned with the common planner, that was primarily where I did like my planning and productivity type stuff. For the Hobonichi HON, then I mainly just used it as like a memory keeper, and so I don't feel like I'll have like too much to comment on like the spreads in here planning wise, but I will go ahead and just review how I used it. So for these monthly calendar sections over here, I basically just used them as like a one line a day, and yeah, just kind of a way to document and keep track of like maybe like the highlights or important events that happened every single day. So I really don't have like too many comments on it. I just thought that it was a nice use of these pages. I pretty much just used my Uniball One gel pen to write these entries here. So that's basically it. I really don't have too much to comment on. Oh, and before I get too carried away, this is also 52 GSM Sanzin Tomoe River paper, so the same exact paper that's in the common planner. And so I'd say that I had a pretty similar experience to the common planner. In terms of the bookmarking system, as you can see, the first ribbon I have here is just to flip open to the current like month that I'm on. And then let's go ahead and flip over to like these monthly calendars here. I've talked about this in a few of my previous videos, but I like to use these calendars as my daily doodles. So at the end of the day or the following morning, then I just like to come in and draw kind of like the highlight or main event that happened that day. And so for these doodles, I pretty much just use like a Sakura Pigma Micron. That's what like all this ink is from. And I feel like it works perfectly fine with the paper. I don't have any issues with like feathering or bleed through, smearing or anything like that. And then in terms of the decorating, I pretty much just follow the same theme that I do in my common planner just to kind of keep it consistent. So again, I use like stickers on these pages. I also use like fountain pens to write like lyrics and stuff. Sometimes I use like watercolor paints. So I feel like the paper just holds up very perfectly, and I've had no issues with it whatsoever for the monthly pages here. But yeah, I really don't have any complaints with the way that I've been using these monthly calendars. I think that they are a very perfect use for my daily doodles, just because since I've started doing these like 7.5 years ago by now, I always used to draw it in like a calendar format anyway. And since I had all of these pre-made calendars, then I figured it would be just the perfect use to have them for my daily doodles. And then pretty much after the monthly calendars, then the rest of the planner here is basically just like daily pages. And so every month then it comes with like this blank page just to kind of like precede all of the daily pages for that month. The way that I've been liking to use it is just to have it be kind of like a month in pictures. And then I also started the year off by like using colored pencils to color in like monthly favorites, but I like quickly abandoned that after I think like February, just because I felt like it was a little too time consuming. So I really don't have any complaints on how the materials held up on this paper. In terms of the little images here, then I used my HP Sprocket Bluetooth printer, and then I just print off a collage that I make on my phone. And then it has like the adhesive backing, so then once I cut them out, I just peel off the back, and then I'm able to just paste them in. And I feel like that's been working out perfectly. It's something that I used to do in my bullet journals like every single year as well. So I thought that this was a really good use of these blank monthly pages here. And then for the daily pages here, then I pretty much just used them for like daily journal entries. And so what I did was I found a gel pen in my collection that I felt closely resembled the monthly color, and then I would just write my journal entry with it. And then I would also just start off my journal entry by writing like the time that I started writing my entry. And so that's basically it. I really don't have like too much to say about how I was using these pages, or how I still currently am using these pages, other than the fact that I truly enjoyed just my experience in this planner overall. I really loved being able to journal in this adorable little A6 size. I felt like it was such a manageable approach to journaling every single day. Because it's an A6 size, it would probably only take me on average like 10 minutes to fill in this page. It could be more or less depending on like how big your handwriting may be, but for me it usually takes me about 10 minutes, and I feel like that's just a really nice amount of time, especially on days where I'm really busy or I like don't really feel like journaling. It's not like a huge commitment or anything, and so I just found it very approachable this past year, and I've really enjoyed it. But yeah, like I mentioned, I pretty much just used mostly like gel pens for these pages here, and then for these blank monthly pages, then I would just use mainly like colored pencils. I'd also use like a gold metallic Uniball One gel pen to kind of draw like these stars and sparkles. This was the only month where I did experience like some bleed through, because I did swatch a couple of inks down here. It did bleed through quite a bit on the other side of the page, but it could have also been just the fact that I applied a lot of the ink and it took a very long time for it to dry. So considering that, it is a little impressive that it never even got onto the other page. But yeah, this was pretty much the only time that this happened throughout this entire book. So with that, I am pretty impressed that it wasn't any worse. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing up December. There are a few blank grid pages back here, which I've just been using to do kind of like a monthly recap page. And so at the end of every month, then I just go in, print out like basically a picture to represent the month, and then I just go ahead and add like a journal entry about the stuff that happened throughout the month. And I found that that has been working out very nicely. Again, I just go in and use the Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip brush pen to write out like the monthly header up here, and then I write my journal entry using that Uniball One gel pen. Yeah, and I don't have any issues with any of that stuff like bleeding through by any means. So yeah, that's basically how I've been liking to use these pages back here. I've had no issues with that. In terms of the little bookmarking system, like I mentioned, the first ribbon bookmark is with that 1 line a day, and then I have another one of the Midori Chiratto clip bookmarks to flip to the current month that we're in for my daily doodles. And then I have the second ribbon bookmark on the current day that I need to do my journal entry. And lastly, another Midori Chiratto clip bookmark just to flip to the next page that I need to do my monthly review for. So yeah, I'd say that about does it for my Hobonichi HON. I really don't feel like there's too much else to say about it. I personally really enjoyed my time in here, and I'm really looking forward to finishing it. I would highly recommend this for anyone who is looking for like a small and just very nice and portable planner. If you have like smaller hands or smaller handwriting, I think that this is such an adorable and lovely option. If you're really into daily planning and you don't necessarily need like a weekly layout, then I think that this is a really good option for you. In terms of like fountain pen inks, I didn't really use them that much in here, with the exception of these lyrics that I'd add to the monthly calendars for my monthly doodles. In terms of my experience with using the fountain pens on these pages, then I've felt like it worked perfectly fine. I didn't have any feathering or bleed through with any of them, so I would imagine that they would perform perfectly fine on like any of the daily pages back here. But all of the other materials that I've used, like the colored pencils and mostly like gel pens, and then also like the Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip, I felt like those worked perfectly fine on this paper and had no issues. Again, just to preface, going into planners like these, just know that there is ghosting to be expected. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this to anyone who is interested in any of the things that I listed off. And I loved this so much that I decided to get the 2026 edition for my actual planner next year. So I'm very excited to use that and essentially have like all the things that I really loved about the Common Planner combined with the things that I really loved about my Hobonichi HON this year. So yeah, that about does it for my review on these two planners. I really hope that you enjoyed it and found it helpful. I'm a little bit sad that the year is coming to an end and I won't be in both of these planners again next year, but like I mentioned, I really loved the Common Planner and I could definitely see myself getting it again in the future, and for 2026 I'll be in another hone, so I really won't have to worry about missing this one too much. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you've used either of these planners, then I would love to know your experience with them down below, and also let me know what planner or planners you'll be using for 2026. I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you found it helpful and informative, and hopefully it wasn't like dragging on for too long. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.